Welcome to the latest episode of Pinnacle's NFL Insights. I'm your host, Eric Eager of Sumer Sports, and I'm with PFF data scientist Ben Brown to help guide you through the world of the NFL with week-to-week reflections and projections. And to get to the reflections part, Ben, Week 11 was a little bit crazy, right? We had Pats Jets was a privilege for most of the game, and then Marcus Jones runs the punt back for a touchdown. Now they're both at 6-4. Battling for a spot at the bottom of the AFC playoff race. We had the Raiders closing at plus 134 to beat Denver and winning outright, coming back from behind and winning, sweeping the Denver Broncos to go to 3-7, letting Denver fall to 3-7. And then we had some contenders do some things, right? The Chiefs with a Patrick Mahomes game-winning touchdown pass to Travis Kelce, they sweep the Chargers effectively. Clinched their 7th straight AFC West title. The Eagles having to come back on the Colts. They were underdogs going into the fourth quarter in that game. And then your beloved Vikings at 8-1, but underdogs at home to the Dallas Cowboys get thrashed 40-3 in what was a mismatch the entire time. Ben, what was your reaction to this week's games?
I mean, my initial reaction is you immediately bringing up contenders and then going straight to the Kansas City Chiefs. And I know that, you might get some flack for it on Twitter and other avenues, but I think it fits, right? I think that the Chiefs have shown very much that they are, for all intents and purposes, the best team in the NFL right now. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback for them, right? I think even with the Bills maybe getting back to full strength in their secondary and those sorts of things, that might even, I would say, the playing field in some ways. But I still think the Chiefs are very much the class of the, overall NFL and should kind of be approached in that manner. And then it depends on, where and how you evaluate some of these teams in the NFC. But I don't know, from my perspective, I know we both have tried to always do this, but never overreacting, I would say, to the best performances from some teams and also the worst performances of some teams. And I think you definitely had that happen quite a bit in week 11, specifically the Cowboys and Vikings. And how to kind of approach them, coming up on this Thanksgiving slate is, I would say kind of the pertinent betting question that we, have to answer, I would say, coming up here in week 12.
Yeah, it was, it was just a weird week, right? Like you had, the one, I think when you look at the team that really wanted to have that game back, it had to be the New York Jets, right? When you're looking at Zach Wilson just not being able to move the football. The first matchup of the Patriots, he throws 3 interceptions, moves the ball okay. Second matchup, he doesn't. I mean, he threw some balls that should have been intercepted, but he comes back and just simply can't move the football. I think.
Yeah, and they kind of had the Jets kind of had the Patriots, right? Like they got a lot of the breaks in that game. Nick Folk missed 2 field goals in situations where maybe Belichick shouldn't have kicked one of those field goals, but like they kind of got the breaks to even have like not their best performance and still potentially win this game. And then they kind of, lost it at the end with the punt return and everything else. But very much, I would say, an indictment on, Zach Wilson, where he's, maybe going to land as an NFL starting quarterback here. But I don't know. What do you make of the Jets, at least? What is their best option this year and going forward at the quarterback position? Do you think it's a move off of Zach Wilson, or like what would you do in that situation?
I think you have to. The hard part is once you make a change from that guy, I think you really have to. You just have to move on because, they're still going to have a stacked roster. Right. Sauce Gardner's been one of the best rookies in all of football this year. Garrett Wilson as well. Before he was injured, Breece Hall was having a good year. Like they're going to be a good roster next year. You don't want to go into next year with Zach Wilson, so you're going to have to go into next year with a different option, which means you're the 5th-year option decision on Zach Wilson is almost always going to be a no, right? And in which case you've already moved on. So I think that they play out the string with him. If he can improve, then obviously you take that for what it's worth moving forward. But then if he doesn't improve, then obviously you have to move on and go for somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo. Maybe you take another shot. I know they lost the sweepstakes for Kirk Cousins in 2018, but he'll certainly, I think, be available via a trade, given how he's playing in Minnesota and their options. So I think that they have to move on from him. But it's just such a good discussion. And I think it plays into, speaking of Kirk Cousins, the Vikings opened the season 44-1 to win the Super Bowl. They're now 14-1 tied with the Ravens. I do want to talk about the Ravens in the outright markets, right? Because when you look at their schedule, it is, relative to the Bengals, their main competitor in the AFC North. The Bengals have a murderer's row of teams, right? They got Tampa Bay on their schedule. They have, they have Kansas City on their schedule. They have Tennessee this week on the road. Buffalo as well. The Ravens have one team with a winning record left on their schedule. To me, they're the one that could challenge the Chiefs for the 1 seed in the AFC, and they're sitting here at just open the season 23-1. They're just 14-1 now, Ben, with a MVP caliber quarterback. What do you think about the Ravens' chances here in kind of a stacked AFC, at least at top?
Right. I think if they're going to get up and actually challenge some of these teams, they very much need to, I would say, still kind of have Rashad Bateman emerge as, a number one wide receiver option. I think we saw it, once again in this matchup in week 11, they did thankfully have Mark Andrews back in the fold. But, without Rashad Bateman, it's basically the DeMarcus Robinson show at the wide receiver position, which is I would say, okay in some of these regular season matchups. And like you said, 29th most difficult, schedule remaining here. So you can do those sorts of things against the Carolina Panthers. But if you want to go toe to toe against, Buffalo and Kansas City, and I would say even Cincinnati, like they very much need, I would say more offensive pass catching weapons outside of Mark Andrews. And I don't know if they have that if Rashad Bateman can't necessarily emerge. And then the other, issue I have with Baltimore is I think their secondary is still kind of living a little bit on name recognition alone. I don't really think, they've, I would say kind of lived up to their billing. And if they're struggling as well, they're relying even more on, Lamar Jackson to need to have some of these MVP type performances every single week. And I think we've seen, in years past when that's kind of been the makeup for how they actually emerge victorious in some of these games against teams that are, on the same tier as them. That's when things start to break off in the playoff times. And that's when they start to see, the first round exits and everything else. So I still think that, it's very much, I would like to buy into Baltimore, but I would say the remnants of where they've been in the past, I don't think have changed to the point where I necessarily think that there's a different outcome for them here in 2022. So I don't know. I might be wrong and bearish on that, but that's my initial read on Baltimore right now, I would say.
Yeah, Bateman out for at least, I believe he was put on IR. I can't remember if it's season ending.
Yes, at least I don't think it was season ending, but I think he was, obviously going to be out 4 games. He's already been out a couple, but if and when he returns is, what state is that offense going to be in? I would guess kind of a question.
And without Gus Edwards to be that downhill runner, they're depending upon Kenyon Drake. On offense, I think defensively they're great, but it's hard to win with defense in the NFL, especially through an AFC that has, guys like, Tua playing so well with Miami, but also Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes being the sort of like God tier guys. In the NFC, we've had sportsbook operators say flat out that they believe the Niners should be favored against an average team, against basically any team in the NFC on a neutral field. We saw them, blow up Arizona Monday night. Right. I do think from a roster standpoint, you grade out the players, they're about as good as anybody. Jimmy Garoppolo is always the squeaky wheel, but he's played well this year. I think he's playing with reckless abandon, knowing he's probably not coming back to the Niners next year, playing for his next job. Ben, when you think about the NFC, it's kind of a 3-team race. Maybe Tampa Bay can get in the mix. It's the Niners, it's the Eagles, it's the Cowboys. Of those 3 teams, Ben, which one would you like to see make the Super Bowl out of this conference?
Yeah, I think the most 2 interested teams and the ones that I think can either knock off Kansas City or Buffalo or the AFC representative is very much San Francisco or Dallas, right? I think, defensively with what Dallas has been able to put forth from a pressure rate perspective, I do think they have, the best front 4 in football right now, especially when trying to generate, pressure situations. And I think that, the concerns or issues that people have with Trayvon Diggs, I would say have kind of been put to bed this year specifically. I think he's been really good. I think he kind of, they have relied, I would say pretty heavily in this cover 2 type scheme. So he is getting a little bit of help over the top, but I think it's working for them. And I think with the pressure situation and everything else, like their defense is very much, I would say, on par with what San Francisco brings forth. And then it comes down to, the offensive weapons. And I think if, you're looking at Dallas right now, they're clearly, a few steps behind the San Francisco 49ers outside of the quarterback position. Maybe Odell Beckham Jr. shifts, the tide a little bit in their direction. But if they're not willing to give, Tony Pollard 50% of the offensive snaps and something, close to 50% of the rush attempts, and have him be involved in the passing game as well. They do very much need a secondary wide receiver option outside of CeeDee Lamb, I would say, to actually, I would say, get through the NFC right now and beat a team like San Francisco. So I am thinking that I would maybe put Dallas a little bit ahead of San Francisco, but that's probably pending, the Odell Beckham situation. Then also, how do they resolve still, the situation at running back? Because I think it's clear that they are a much better offense overall with Tony Pollard on the field. And if they are going to continue to, rest on some of their priors and still trot out, Ezekiel Elliott out there for 65 to 70% of the snaps, like, I think that's going to hinder their offense. And I think that's when San Francisco, Jimmy Garoppolo, and all things considered, are probably the best team in the NFC still.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get to see, the Niners' problem has been consistency. That's why, and staying healthy. And that's why they're only 6-4 right now. And still, I think they have the tiebreaker over the Seattle Seahawks right now, but they're still in a slug match to win that NFC West, even with the Rams faltering so poorly, already going under their season win total. Sunday's games aren't the greatest. I do want to talk about two of them, but let's talk about all three of the Thursday games, all three of Thanksgiving Day games. When you listen to this for the first time, it might be just tomorrow's game. So the Buffalo Bills head to Detroit. They're actually just staying in Detroit because there was such a catastrophic snowstorm in Western New York this week, last week, and so they faced the Detroit Lions. The Lions, fresh off of 3 consecutive wins, restoring the roar. Ben,
it's happening. We believe.
No respect given to the Lions here. The Bills are laying 10 on Pinnacle, -103 to the Bills, -110 to the Detroit Lions. 10 seems like a lot, Ben. I know the Lions aren't that good, and I know the Bills are sort of in the kind of with Kansas City, one of the 2 best teams in the NFL, but 10's a lot to give up in an NFL game.
10 is a lot, early, especially on the road. Detroit maybe has a little bit more of a home field advantage on Thanksgiving. I'm not quite sure how you handicap that or not, but like 10's a lot. The reasoning for why Buffalo can get there, I would say, is, Detroit defensively, right? And the question becomes, like, can Jared Goff keep up with a Josh Allen-led offense that is hitting out all cylinders, especially, if Detroit's putting out the worst secondary in the NFL. I think they rank 32nd in, coverage grade from PFF's perspective so far. Lose Jeffrey Okudah for this matchup as well. So it's going to be, I would say a pretty big mismatch with both Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. 1 or 2 chunk plays go for them. Maybe that's how they cover, but, Goff's always live to get through the back door. So I think 10 is, way too much in this perspective. I think if I like anything in this matchup, I'm hoping and praying for a shootout early on. And I do think, Josh Allen over 2.5 passing touchdowns, +150 price or so like that. That's the spot where I really want to buy into a Buffalo successful offensive setup throughout the entire game. And I think that gets there if Josh Allen doesn't end up running in one of the touchdowns himself, I would say. Yeah. So I don't know. That's the only real read I have on it. Are you playing Detroit? Have you already played Detroit?
I think I'll play Detroit at +10 for sure. I'll put that into my bet stamp.
What about the money line? Are you going to play the money line?
I mean, look, I do think Detroit still has an outside chance to win 5 of the last 7 and get to above 500 on the year. I don't know if I can go ahead and take money line here. But I do like Amon-Ra St. Brown over 7.5 catches at like +110 as well. If you can look at the prop market in that game, that's a bet I do like. Fast forwarding, a big game. This takes you back to flashbacks of Lawrence Taylor winning games by himself, intercepting passes, running back, touchdown, sacking quarterbacks. The New York Giants, fresh off of a loss at home to the beloved Detroit Lions last week, they go to Dallas. They're getting 9.5, -101 for so it's kind of similar spread basically here. Cowboys juiced -9.5, total on the game 45.5. The Cowboys, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. 1 week they blow a 14-point lead on the road to the Green Bay Packers. The next week they blow out Minnesota in US Bank Stadium. They come home. This is a game, the Giants lost to Dory Jackson on a punt return. They lost Wan'Dale Robinson. They already don't have great skill position players out of Saquon Barkley, and Barkley went 15 for 24 against the Lions. Like, this is a clear, to me, Dallas or pass. I just think the Giants just don't have enough going for them. Dable a great coach, but I think the Cowboys outclassed the New York Giants here, right, Ben?
Yeah, I think the Cinderella story is a little bit up for the New York Giants at this point. Part of it was, the fact, like you said, like they just don't have a ton from the skill positions. Wandell Robinson, I would say definitely flashed in week 11, but the fact that he's now out, it is very concerning. They're going to be led by, Darius Slayton, basically, who has had some yards after the catch type ability, but I think that's more been based on some missed tackles, more so than his actual skill set. So it's concerning, right? I think that going into last week's game, I would have thought that this was a place that I would definitely be playing the Giants, but after their injury situation on Sunday, like they were kind of ravaged by injuries all across the board. Offensive line, like you said, Adoree Jackson in the secondary, like they don't have a lot left here, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting. I think it will be a big testament to Brian DeBoer if they don't actually kind of lay over here on Thursday. But it's just a spot that I don't really want to get involved in. So I don't really love, I would say, anything in this matchup right now. I have looked a little bit at the prop market. It's kind of light right now, but this is the game where I kind of expect things to get out of hand. Might be the spot where you want to eat some turkey or something like that and get away from the TV or something. I don't know. Do you have a play on this one? Maybe CeeDee Lamb over 5.5 receptions or something? Is that the spot to be in?
That's the one I was thinking about for one of the shows that I'm doing on that day. But I agree, this is a take a nap during the game sort of play. Although last year the Vegas Raiders went into Dallas, not similarly underdog. I think it were maybe 7.5-point dogs. They won outright. But we get the Sunday night game. New England, fresh off of a 7-point cover, win against the Jets, where both teams had 3 points until the last 30 seconds of the game. They go on the road to Minnesota, 42.5 is the total. The Vikings are favored by 2.5, minus 109. I think this opened 3.5. It's been bet down significantly. And I think a lot of this has to do with what I like on this game, which is like, I don't think the Vikings are going to be able to score that much in this game. Matthew Judon's leading the NFL in sacks. They have a good, just a defense that I think is going to be able to take advantage of the fact that Christian Darrisaw is not playing left tackle for the Vikings. There are no NFL players on the interior of the Vikings offensive line. Ezra Cleveland, Garrett Bradbury, and Ed Ingram are all terrible. Kirk Cousins is terrible when he has to face pressure. And the defense, I think, got a little bit exposed the other day against Dallas. I like 42.5 under here, minus 104. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, the concern, kind of like you said, is I don't think the Vikings defense is all that great, right? They've been in the right place at the right time and gotten some big interceptions in crucial spots. But outside of that, they've been, I would say, a little bit lackluster, especially in the secondary. Zadarius Smith banged up. Danielle Hunter definitely hasn't been there, I would say, from a pressure perspective, kind of like we, thought he could be back when he was kind of living out his best life in his heyday. So I'm concerned about the Vikings defensively, but I think you got to be more concerned about the New England Patriots offense as well. No real signs of life from Mac Jones either. I know they had the 2 missed field goals with Nick Folk last weekend that would have helped them beat the Jets and wouldn't have necessarily needed to have that punt return touchdown. But it's a spot where this is kind of tough to play. I think that the handicap for me seems to be that everyone thinks that this is essentially going to be a very similar match for the Minnesota Vikings offensively, right? You look at the pressure rate, Cowboys first, Patriots second. Like the Patriots are going to have the same success and the Vikings are going to live in third and long and not have anything to do with it, which that could happen. But I think the coverage scheme for what the Patriots are going to put forth is actually going to open up some things for Justin Jefferson. And I think that if him and TJ Hawkinson, can find some space over the middle, that the Vikings might be able to alleviate the concerns that a lot of people have, on their offensive line. And if that happens, I think this would be a bounce back spot for the Vikings. But like you said, the concern is obviously the pressure, impacts Kirk Cousins to the point where this is just a, dysfunctional offense for the second straight week. But I think if, I'm playing anything, I will probably get on board with the Vikings minus 2.5, have to, I guess. And then Justin Jefferson over 6.5 receptions. I like this matchup specifically in the secondary for Justin Jefferson a lot more than I did last week. So I think he's targeted more frequently underneath and has a couple explosive plays after the catch. And if he does that, I think the Vikings are going to actually probably win this one relatively easily.
Very good. If you like the Patriots, I think the best of it is already gone. You could have gotten over a field goal at some point. So it really is, I think, from a spread perspective, a layoff situation, unless you like the Vikings and maybe there's a bounce back in store for Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell, by the way, this is a Kevin O'Connell revenge game. He was drafted by Bill Belichick's Patriots in the third round, 15 years or so ago.
I
So this is
mean,
the Kevin O'Connell revenge game.
uh,
Okay.
I got to say one thing though. I mean, if you like the Kevin O'Connell Coach of the Year candidacy tickets, like this is kind of the spot you need, right? Like a response after getting your teeth kicked in a little bit. Everyone kind of saying this is going to be the exact same game script as we saw, 1 week ago where they couldn't do anything, block anybody, or have any functioning offense. So if they come out and showcase a little bit, I would say get the Kevin O'Connell tickets out for just a little bit longer, or keep the tickets, as some wise men would say, out or something like that, right? So.
Yeah, very easy schedule down the stretch. So I do think that there is an opportunity for him to still make good on that Coach of the Year. You're going to need a couple floppier games out of Sirianni as well, but that's certainly in the cards for this one, as they say. Okay, moving on to Sunday. This is a rematch of a 1991 playoff game. This is a game that I don't think either one of us thought would be a game between two NFC possible playoff teams, but it is. The Atlanta Falcons go to Washington to play the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are favored by about 4, minus 4.5 is plus 102. Total on game 41.5. Ben, what do you think of this game?
I mean, I will say that I cannot make sense of what's happening with the Taylor Heineke-led Washington Commanders. I know the spreads in their direction. Falcons are just, I would say, not in a state in which I want to back them whatsoever. So I think if you're playing it, you definitely didn't get the best of the number, but I think it's kind of Washington or bust for me on this one, and I can't really explain really well why I say that, but I'm not really backing the Falcons, so I think it's maybe a little bit more of a fade on that. But I don't know. I still can't make sense of what's happening in Washington with Taylor Heineke and his PFF grade and everything else. But they are, winning football games, and they've definitely rallied around him and Ron Rivera. And, I think that makes them at least, maybe a little bit of a dark horse candidate, or at least a pretty decent shot, I would say, to get into the NFC playoffs right now. And if they do that, who knows what's going to happen at that point.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story. I think if Washington get to 7-5, preseason win total of 7.5. I know we bet that when we were in Iowa then at the very beginning of the summer. Some people even have a stray 8.5 on the Commanders. Like it's within reach for them. They have 2 games against the Giants consecutively that sandwich a bye relatively soon. So things are looking up for the Commanders here. Third straight year under Ron Rivera, they started slow and end up around 6-6 at this time of the year. So it's kind of characteristic of them. The last Sunday game I want to talk about, Ben, this one is a rematch also of a divisional playoff game. This one is from last year. The Cincinnati Bengals, who won their first road playoff game in the history of their franchise just last January in Tennessee. They go back. They are minus 129 on the money line. Tennessee plus 116. Total on the game 43. This is one where I want to say that the Bengals are outclassing the Titans. I really, really do. Even without Chase, Higgins is so good. Boyd's good. Offensive line's finding themselves a little bit. Burrow is playing fantastic football. The defense, I think, is stronger than we believe. But there's always just something the Titans do that helps them win games like this. So, Ben, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, it's another one, kind of like we said with Washington. There's something that you can't necessarily quantify with the Titans or Washington, but they find find ways to win some of these gritty, scrappy type games, right? And I think that Tennessee specifically, everyone's going to point to the 9 sacks they had against Joe Burrow last year when they matched up, and the fact that they're going to probably be able to do that once again. And if they get Derrick Henry going early, like they could very much pull this home victory out, but. I don't know. I think I'm not counting out Ja'Marr Chase yet. I think he's questionable. I think he could trend towards playing. If he does, the Titans secondary specifically quite banged up. No, Fulton's questionable. Molden's questionable as well. I think losing Caleb Farley as well. Like they don't really have the depth at the cornerback position, I would say, to kind of compete with a fully functioning Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver unit. So that's the spot that I'm playing. I understand all the narratives with Tennessee, but I think I have to fade them one more week. Go with the team that got me here and take Cincinnati, I guess. But it sounds like I'm probably opposite you in that line of thinking in that bet here coming up in week 12 or not.
Yeah, I'm just laying off the game, I think, all entirely, but I do think it's an important game to talk about just because, it matters. It matters in the AFC standings. I mean, the Bengals have such a hard schedule moving forward here. They probably need to win this game. Whereas with Tennessee, like, Indy's kind of plucky right now. Jacksonville
Right.
has, good underlying metrics, but they haven't won enough games at 3-7. They're kind of in a position where they're more battling for the one seed like they were last year than they are battling for another AFC West or AFC South title. I'm sorry. Um, okay, speaking of battling for a title, we just had the college football playoff rankings come out. Um, we have two Big Ten teams in the top three. TCU, as far as odds here on Pinnacle, we have Georgia minus 140, they're favorites to repeat. Ohio State is plus 250. And then it's a huge chasm. Michigan is 12-1, TCU 14-1. TCU with a really funny walk-off win against Baylor in Baylor last week that kept them alive here. Clemson 20-1, USC 25-1. Again, USC, much to our chagrin, beats UCLA close last week. LSU 41, Oregon 55-1, North Carolina 80-1. This is the weirdest group after the top two that I've ever
Right.
seen. And it's going to get worse, right? Because Michigan is going to Ohio State this weekend.
Right.
They're getting 7.5. Georgia, I think is gonna coast here. Ben, what do you think? Is there a playable play here, or is it? I mean, is it just square to say, look, lay the 140 with Georgia? They're a house, and I don't see anybody like pray that Ohio State gets knocked out by Michigan or somebody else in the Big Ten title game, and Georgia doesn't even have to see them, or is there an underlying undervalued team that you like?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think that you don't gain enough, I would say, by betting one of these under the radar type teams right now, right? I think USC, very public team, I would say slim chance that they get into the college football playoff. TCU, even if they get into the college football playoff, are they even gonna, they're gonna be at least 2 touchdown underdogs to any of the other 3 teams that they face off against, right? So like neither of those plays, I would say, are all that great unless you're trying to, milk a little value off of just getting into the college football playoffs. So I think it's Georgia or bust. I'm fine being square in that spot. I do think they are, clearly the best team in college football. I think they're better than Ohio State by a decent margin. I think Ohio State handles business here, but we'll see what they actually, do with this match against Michigan this weekend. If Michigan covers, are they both going to get in, with an Ohio State Big Ten title or not? I'm not quite sure, but I think it's Georgia or bust, and I just don't really like any other team enough or think they can even come close to beating Georgia enough times in order to, find any other value in any other bet, I would say at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's close here by looking at college football. I do want to talk about one game that's on Thursday because that is our national holiday in the States. The Egg Bowl, Mississippi State goes to Mississippi. Mississippi favored by 2.5, a cheaper 2.5. Total on the game 59.5. Ben, I know what the PFF model says. I know what you're going to say. Give me a reason for why we should back Mississippi in this spot.
I don't know. I mean, I like the under in this game. I think that's probably the only spot I'd really want to get involved in. Ole Miss, I can take it or leave it on with them, I would say right now. I don't know. It's been a little bit of a struggle, I would say. I don't know. I don't really have a great reason for why I'd want to back Ole Miss. I'm curious to hear your bullish case on them, unless you are,
I think they rally. I think they rally behind Lane Kiffin and like the allegations that he's leaving. Mississippi State has been a team, with Mike Leach. It just hasn't
shown out as well. Right.
Yeah, it hasn't been the most clean set of games in the world for them. They're plucky. I do agree that the spread should be short, but I do think Ole Miss wins this game outright. And as such, like as the 1 and the 2 in college football aren't worth that much. I think you lay it there.
I do think Jackson Dart is the better quarterback, I would say, more so than Will Rogers at this point. I mean, Rogers just flashed a little bit, but I think Dart offers enough with his running game as well that this should maybe be a spot where the Rebels are up early. So
yeah, one for the road here. Western Kentucky laying 7 against Florida Atlantic. I think the Hilltoppers have been just so good this year. I know that they got beat by Auburn last week and didn't cover, but they hung in that game for basically a whole half. I like the spunk there. That's my one game for the road here for college football, Ben? Is there anyone that appetizes you at all?
Oh, it appetizes me at all. I don't know. I thought you were maybe gonna bring up the Friday game we have at kickoff here, Cincinnati versus your Tulane Green Wave, because I don't know. I think there's a little bit of value on Cincinnati. I think I've been opposite Tulane for the past like 3 weeks. Has not worked out well so far, but I might go to the well for one more round here with the Cincinnati Bearcats. I don't know. Is that have you done anything with this spread, or are you just completely avoiding your hometown team?
I think it's reasonable. I actually kind of want to go to the game, but I probably won't. The couple of games that are interesting to me, in addition to this one, if we're just going to bring those up, Coastal Carolina already has a spot in their conference title game wrapped up. They're also playing a backup quarterback. I do think that James Madison at minus 13.5 is an interesting line given all those things. Right. And then lastly, but certainly not leastly, my Nebraska Cornhuskers getting 11 in Iowa. I mean, this game might like end 10-3. So like, I don't know, take it with Nebraska, and they cover. They should have beat Wisconsin for the first time in forever last week, but were unable to. So a fun week of NFL and college football. Ben, it's so fun to do this podcast with you still, even though now we work for different companies. But this was the NFL Insights podcast for another week at Pinnacle Podcast on all the platforms to follow and keep up to date on all Pinnacle's latest shows and Pinnacle's World Cup 2022 Insights powered by Infogo for in-depth analysis as the Soccer World Cup kicked off earlier this week. Please keep across Pinnacle.com's page for the latest betting insights, including Mark Taylor's Game of the Week, Pinnacle's weekly NFL predictions article, and NCAA college football predictions. So for Ben Brown at PFF_Ben Brown, this has been Eric Eager at Eric Eager. This has been the NFL Insights podcast brought to you by Pinnacle Sports.